Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. Now let's start over in the Kursk area of operations, and let's take a look at exactly what is happening in this area. So as we speak, there are anywhere between 5 and possibly as many as 10,000 Ukrainian troops operating on both sides of the shared border between the Kursk Oblast, Kursk region, and the Ukrainian border further to the south in the direction towards Sumy. Now, what the Russians are doing right now is they are setting up phase lines. They're setting up phase lines to the north, they're setting up phase lines to the south, and obviously to the north by northeast as well. At the same time, they have evacuated large numbers of Russians who, at the time, were living in this area. So the main goal for the Russians was first, get the population out of the war zone, secure the front lines, both to the north, and I think the north was probably their most worrisome area that they wanted to accomplish in terms of preventing the Ukrainians from further advancing, especially towards the E-38. They did not want the Ukrainians to shoot north and cut the E-38. So the Russians now have blocking formations, which are effectively preventing the Ukrainians from moving further to the north it would essentially be kind of like the northwest or due north. To the south, it's kind of the same thing. The E-105 is not as threatened. And then obviously the main Ukrainian advance was happening on the R-200, on this main route this way. And obviously it passes through the small border town of about 5,000 of Suja. Now, what is going to happen next is after these blocking formations are set up, and the Russians have a very good idea of who and where the opposing forces are and where their forces are. Because remember, you have a couple of different things going on. You have regular Russian ground force units. You have Russian naval infantry, possibly Spetsnaz, possibly VDV formations as well, that are also operating with Russian formerly Ministry of the Interior troops or National Guard troops. Okay, so the communication between the Russian National Guard and, say, the Ministry of Defense, especially operating with the Russian Air Force, is not the same as the Russian ground forces trying to operate with the Russian Air Force. The National Guard, which was taking the brunt of the fighting, is not really designed to operate directly with the Russian Air Force. It's more of an internal security force that was engaging frontline Ukrainian units. Now, elements of the Russian National Guard have very capable units, very capable light infantry units. But again, they're not designed to work directly with the Russian Air Force. So what we're seeing is we're starting to see Russian ground forces moving into the area. And then what's going to happen is once the Russian Air Force has a very good idea of exactly where these National Guard units are, or where the Russian ground forces are operating in, it's going to be a free-for-all for the Russian Air Force. So these blocking formations are going to prevent Ukrainian movement east, north, south. And then you're going to see Su-25, Su-24, Su-34s taking to the air, Su-30s, and conducting air strike missions against these Ukrainian ground forces, especially these ground forces that are operating in these columns on this R-200 major highway. We're seeing a lot of Ukrainian units that are now diverting off these major roads and are taking positions in small towns, near civilian structures, and then obviously trying to hide in the limited amount of local foliage as well. But that is exactly what is happening. And if the Ukrainians can't move forward and they have limited success, at the same time they're being attacked from the air by the Russian Air Force, their supply lines that is coming in from Ukraine are also going to be attacked by the Russian Air Force and drones and what have you. It's going to be very difficult to keep a divisional-sized element operating inside of Russia. It just is. And especially given the fact that the Ukrainians don't have an air force, and the Russians do have an air force, and they're going to be using this air force against these columns and formations of Ukrainian troops that have crossed over into the Kursk region. It's going to become very, very, and increasingly very difficult for Ukrainian forces. Again, a lot of what they were able to do was because they were engaging Russian National Guard units. The Russian Air Force did not know the disposition and location of a lot of these National Guard units. So there was a high degree of risk of the Russian Air Force engaging its own forces, its own National Guard forces. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, if we go back down to the south, towards the Avdiivka penetration or breakthrough area, this is where the heaviest fighting is taking place. So contrary to what the media is telling you in terms of the fighting that is taking place in Kursk, the real heavy fighting continues to be further to the south in Donetsk. The fighting in the south and the number of Russian airstrikes are far more intense and much more robust in terms of Russian capability than what's happening in the north, Kursk. And the fighting that is taking place in Donetsk is still incredibly intense, very serious, and the Russians continue to take terrain and take territory of the Ukrainians. So that's where we sit for today. We will continue to monitor the situation in the north near Kursk. Again, let me scroll out here real quick where it'll give you, the viewer, the idea of just how really insignificant this intrusion is down in Kursk. You can barely even see it from this map, but obviously I've gone very, very high. But again, there it is. Again, one small town and quite a bit of what is essentially unpopulated fields. Unpopulated fields in a town. And you have upwards to 10,000 Ukrainian troops that are about to just get the living crap knocked out of it through air power. So we'll see what happens. More to come as always. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day.